somewhat ironic, very indeed. I wish they'd stand up and talk about restoring our constitutional rights in this country and give us back some hope and freedoms that we all enjoy. As your next president, I promise to do this. I will reassert the United States' moral authority around the world, and I'll reassert our leadership around the world as well. I believe very strongly that you ought to lead by the force of your example in this country and not by the example of your force. I'm not reluctant to use that under circumstances that requires it, but it's the force of our example that makes a difference. Nancy very generously mentioned that I was born into a family of public servants. I'm born to a family of teachers, people who care about the future of our country. I was fortunate to be raised by parents who were deeply involved in the public life of our country. When I was a year old in 1945, my father went off for 2 weeks to a place called Nuremberg, Germany. Those 2 weeks turned into 18 months, where he became the executive trial counsel under Robert Jackson at the Nuremberg trials and prosecuted the 21 defendants. It was a life-altering experience, my father, and he raised his 6 children with a deep commitment to the rule of law and to the Constitution. And he taught me early on of a sentence that Robert Jackson used on the opening day of the Nuremberg trials in the fall of 1945, which I've never forgotten. And it relates very directly to what I'm talking about this evening. Speaking about the Soviet Union, the British, the French, and ourselves, Robert Jackson said the following. He said that 4 great nations flushed with victory and stung with injury stayed the hand of vengeance by voluntarily submitting their captive enemies to the judgment of the rule of law. It was the greatest tribute that power ever paid to reason. An incredible sentence. There were these 21 defendants responsible for the deaths of 55 million people. 6 million Jews were incinerated. 5 million others lost their lives because of ethnicity or politics. And yet the United States determined, a handful I might add, determined that we were different, that we were going to stand for something far more important. We were going to stand for the rule of law. And so that trial went forward, and you mentioned the word Nuremberg today, anywhere in the world, and it conjures up the moral high ground of the United States. Say Abu Ghraib, say Guantanamo. What do people think? I want to see our country not only get back on its feet here at home, which we've got to do, but I want to see the United States lead again in this world. That window is closing for us. We need to assert that leadership to make a difference for our country. And I commit to do that. And like others who've talked to this evening here, like others this evening, I'm going to continue doing everything I possibly can between now and 2009 to bring an end to our military involvement in the civil war in Iraq. All of us stand for that. But we've got to have the determination to do it, to make a difference. And I'm not going to wait. I'm not going to wait until 2013. I saw those banners up here. Any Democrat who can't stand up here and promise they're going to get our troops out of Iraq before 2013, I wonder what they're standing for. We ought to get our troops home, and we can do it. Certainly within the next 6 years. Certainly within the next 6 years. Leonard Boswell was up here on the stage a minute ago. Tomorrow is Veterans Day. We may disagree over the policy in Iraq, but I'd like all of you to do something in a moment like this. I'd like all of you to join me. Tomorrow is Veterans Day, to be celebrated on Monday. Every single one of us in this room owe the freedoms and the opportunities we have because of a lot of kids from this state and mine and across this country throughout the ages who've given their lives that you and I might do what we're doing this evening, to gather freely, to criticize our government, to speak our minds. Will you join me in standing up and paying tribute to America's veterans? Pay tribute to our veterans. These kids serving in Iraq, serving in Afghanistan, making a difference for our country. Let's stand up and say thank you. Thank you, Leonard Boswell. Thank you, others who've given their lives for our country and served. Thank you for doing that. Thank you. It means a lot. I say that to you because not only did I serve in the Peace Corps in Latin America back in the 1960s, but I'm the only Democratic candidate, I believe, who served in uniform. I was in the National Guard and the Army Reserves after being in the Peace Corps. And I believe that that's important to service to country. I want to mention and talk about electability here in these brief closing remarks to you. All of us know how important this election is. I think Joe Biden said it well. Others have as well. How important it is. The decisions you make here in Iowa in the next 54 days and the decision our party makes over the coming months as we consider the various candidacies. The problems are mounting by the hour in this country. Joe mentioned Pakistan. He's absolutely right. Obviously, Iran, Iraq. The problems, the lack of health care in this country. An educational system we worry about. Higher educational costs going through the ceiling. We may be looking at $100 a barrel oil in the matter of days in this country. The problems are growing larger and more complicated. It is critical, absolutely critical, that we nominate a candidate that can bring our party together, that will attract independents and Republicans who are desirous of change, who want to see this country move in a different direction. The very same qualities, I would argue, that we're going to be looking for in the leader who assumes the job on January 20th of 2009, bringing our country together, taking on these problems that we know exist both domestically and internationally. Proven experience and background in proving results. Leadership in this country that has been demonstrated by what you've been able to achieve. The job of the presidency may be the only one in America where references aren't required. We wouldn't hire someone to remodel our kitchens without knowing whether or not they could do it or not. When you're seeking the nomination of this office, when you're talking about someone dealing with the problems of both domestic and international complexity, it is critically important that we choose a nominee of our party that has the proven ability to bring results for our country, to create change. That is the important criteria. For the last 26 years, in fact, going back further with Tom Harkin, the last 26 years, that's what I've done in the United States Senate. Nancy graciously mentioned the child care legislation, the Family and Medical Leave Act. And every single instance I've been involved in of a major policy initiative, I've invited a Republican to join me because it wasn't going to happen without them in the United States Senate. That's how it works. No one party is going to solve all of these problems. No one candidate can solve it on his or her own. It's going to require the political abilities to bring people together to make a difference for our country. That's what I've done for a quarter of a century. That's what I started when I founded the Children's Caucus in the United States Senate 26 years ago, when I invited Orrin Hatch of Utah to be involved in the child care legislation. That was the last time I did anything with Orrin Hatch, but I got him to do it on child care. But that's what you have to do to make a difference, to bring our country together. What everyone's talked about this evening, to bring our country back in line. That's what people want more than anything else. They want our country once again to feel like they're part of a family that's moving forward. Nancy mentioned that Jackie and I have two very young children, a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. My daughter Grace was born 2 days after 9/11 in Arlington, Virginia. She was actually due on 9/11. But because of the fear that the hospital would be filled with the injured out of the Pentagon, Jackie was put on a labor-delaying drug for 2 days, and Grace arrived on the 13th. And I did on that day what every single one of you in this room have done with your own children, or your grandchildren, your nieces, or your nephews. But particularly on that day, knowing that the world had just changed forever 2 days earlier, picking her up and asking that question: what kind of a country, what kind of a world was she going to grow up in? What are you and I going to do about it to make it better? It isn't just about political leadership. It's about every single one of us feeling that collective sense of obligation, because we'll be judged as a generation, not just by the leaders we choose, on whether or not we had enough presence of mind, enough determination and common sense to come together to make a difference for our nation. I joined the Peace Corps in 1966, and I've been asked 1,000,000 times, why did I join the Peace Corps? I'll give you the answer I've given for 1,000,000 times, and an American president asked me to. There was a time not long ago when leadership in this country invited us all to be a part of things larger than ourselves.